Hey everybody, Chad here. In this video, we're going to talk about relationships, how to have great relationships. I'm going to put a spin on it because I like to kind of dive into, kind of talk about one unique topic, something that's a bad habit in me that I've done in relationships in the past and to continually to work on that it kind of affects everybody. You know what I mean? And you may struggle with this and you may not. What kind of made me do this video was I was talking to my sister the other day, kind of around this topic a little bit because my nephew's 19, and of course, you're young, you're in young relationships, and we kind of got talking about this topic a little bit. You know, how to have great relationships, but what is kind of like basically one bad habit that we do in relationships that kind of make us over time, no matter it's weeks, months, or years, that kind of make us basically we're not happy inside the relationship. Lots of times it's not the other person, okay? In this example, lots of times it's not the other person. Most of the time it's us, okay? That makes us not feel happy inside the relationship. It makes you feel like you want to move on to another partner. And one of the things I'm kind of really talking about that I have a bad habit into is, and it's kind of tricky to explain because people will, sometimes people, ad lib what I'm saying, or add different things to it, but lots of times, like in my past relationships, is that you kind of lose yourself in the relationship a little bit. And what I mean by that is you give up kind of what you want to do to always do what your partner wants to do. And I'm super guilty of that, where I give up what I want to do in order to make my partner happy. And you're continuing to do that all over. You're continually doing that at a very kind of extreme way. You know what I mean? You're really giving up your wants, your desires, what you want to accomplish in order to do what your partner wants. And I'm not really talking about compromising. Okay. Yes, in a relationship, any type of relationship, sexual relationships, friendships, we all have to compromise. So I'm not talking about compromising where it's like, oh, Chad's over here, he just wants to do what he wants to do. I'm not talking about compromising. What I'm talking about is in relationships that we're two independent people. Okay. Both of us are independent. Okay. And we're coming together to form a relationship, but we're still independent. And what I mean by that is we still have, this is Chad over here. This is me. I still have my wants and desires and accomplishments that I want to achieve in my life. I still have my own hobbies that I like and I enjoy. Okay. And my partner is the same way. They have their wants and desires and accomplishments that they want to achieve in their life. And they have their own separate hobbies that they like to do. Okay. And hobbies don't have to be always coming together, that you always have to do things together. You always have to like the same things. Okay. And in the real world, two independent people get together. I'm going to have certain things I like to do that my partner doesn't like. They're going to have certain things they like to do that, Chad don't like. Okay. This is what I'm talking about. In the beginning, in my relationships in the past, I tend to kind of give up, okay, what I want to do, what I want to accomplish, what I want to achieve in my life. I tend to give that up in order to make my partner happy. Okay. I tend to give up like my hobbies, okay, in order to make my partner happy. That's what I mean by the extreme. And it could be either one of you doing this, okay? I mean, sometimes it's both of you inside the relationship, but normally it's usually one person inside the relationship that's doing this, okay? And, lots of times it's how we're brought up. It's what we've seen by our mom and dad, our parents, what we've seen by our aunts and uncles and grandma and grandpa. And a lot of it has to do with that, kind of how we were brought up, what we see on TV. But anyway, no matter how, no matter why we do it, we do it. And what I've noticed is usually for myself is it's usually not weeks. It's usually not months for me. It's usually like years for me. I mean, I've always been in very long-term relationships. Okay. I've never really been in, I dated this person for a month. I dated her for a couple weeks. I dated her for 6 months. I dated her for 3 months. I've always been in very long-term relationships where maybe it's 7 years, it's 12 years, it's 2 years. You get the drift. So I'm doing this for a long time. And, one day I just wake up and I'm not happy. And the reason why I'm not happy is because I'm not being myself. I'm not being the authentic self, okay, who I really am. And the reason why we get like that is because we're constantly giving up who we are in order to make our partner happy, okay, in order to make our partner like us. Like if it's in the beginning of a relationship, you kind of give up what you really want to do. You kind of give up what you really like because we're afraid, deep down psychology, we're afraid that our partner we're trying to impress isn't going to like us, okay? And we start giving that up. And no matter how long that lasts, weeks, months, or years, sooner or later you're going to wake up and you're not going to be happy. And the reason why you're not happy has nothing really to do with your partner. It's really all you because you're giving up that side of you. You're not being the authentic self. You're not doing your hobbies that you love and enjoy at one time in your life. Okay, if it's hanging out with the homeboys, going out with the girls, maybe you're an athlete, you love to work out, you love to go be in sports and all that stuff. No matter what it is, that you're not doing that no more. See, that's why you're not happy. It's really not the other person. The other person's not making you unhappy in these examples. It's really your own self because you're giving that up. Okay. Now, what happens is it's kind of like a vicious cycle. Okay. What happens is we end up breaking up with the person because we're just not happy. At the time, we don't know why we're not happy. We just know we're not happy. But then what I find is when we go out with somebody else, well, the same cycle continues. You know what I mean? That you go out with somebody else, someone new, you're excited in the beginning, but we tend to do the same thing. We start to give up who we are in order to make the other person happy. Okay. Another example is for myself. Now, I've always kind of been an entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur, lots of times it takes a lot of work, lots of times it's hard to walk away because you're always mentally thinking about your stuff because it's your business. Okay. You're not an employee for somebody where you don't care or you don't give a shit. You know what I mean? The employee mindset, you just don't care. You go do your job, come home, you don't care. Okay. It's not your business. Who cares? You're collecting a paycheck, they're paying you, and you go home, forget about it. Okay. It's easier that way than if you're an entrepreneur. When you're an entrepreneur, you're always thinking how to improve your business. If you improve your business, well, then that's more money to you. Maybe it's you're thinking about, how to make your business more efficient. Okay. How to create more passive income so it doesn't take so much of your time. But in the beginning, it takes time because you're trying to think strategies around it. You're trying to think, how can you accomplish this? Okay, so it's harder for an entrepreneur to kind of just walk away and leave work at work and home at home. Basically being able to separate work and playtime. You know what I mean? And lots of times I found myself like in relationships, I would give that up. I start giving up, start slacking on my entrepreneurship in order to make my partner happy. Makes sense? And then, several months down the road, maybe a year or two down the road, now I wake up one day, it's like, dude, I'm not, I don't want to do this no more. I want to go back and do what I want to do. I want to go back and be an entrepreneur. I want to go back and build my business. I want to go back and blah, 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 or may hang out with friends that I neglected and stuff like that because I never did when I first started this new relationship. So that's what I'm kind of talking about, like kind of our habits. Okay, we gotta, just like with the law of attraction, law of manifesting, we kind of have to dig deep into our habits of what are we really doing, because lots of times in these examples, it's never the other person. Okay, it's never really the other person destroying the relationship. It's really you and how you're destroying it, or how I'm destroying it. And if you're kind of like me, how you're destroying it is because you're not being independent. Okay, you're not You're not being your authentic self. Okay. You're not continuing inside your relationship when it's, especially when it's brand new, you're not continuing being who you are, keeping with your hobbies that you love. Okay. Hanging out with the guys, in my example, staying where you're an entrepreneur, or still moving forward your goals and your careers and your aspirations you have. You're not continually doing that. Okay. You're giving that up. And sooner or later, it's going to creep back into your life. And that's kind of what makes or breaks the relationship, is you only can be that way for so long. And then in my examples, it's, I can kind of be that way for years. What I mean? It seems kind of hard. How can you hang in there for that long? But sometimes, I'll wake up like, dude, I'm not doing what I really want to do. That's why if you kind of look back at my past, that's why sometimes my businesses will start exploding. Then it falls because I'm in a relationship. Then it explodes, then it falls because I'm inside the relationship. So I'm kind of giving up that piece of me a little bit. I'm not staying a little bit more independent, being strong and firm on what I want to do. Even though it sounds kind of selfish, okay, how I'm kind of explaining it kind of sounds selfish, but it's really not. Okay, and it's really what makes, okay, a happy relationship in this example. I know there's many examples to what makes a happy relationship, but it's not, giving up who you are, giving up your authentic self. If somebody don't like you for who you are, your authentic self, if somebody really don't like your hobbies, and that's going to make and break that relationship, well, it's better to break it right in the beginning rather than being in that relationship for 2, 3, 4 years and wake up one day and then that's what breaks the relationship, because the person really don't like your hobbies, and you, at that point, you put your foot down and say no. Okay, it's rather break that relationship in the beginning rather than waste 3, 4 years of your time in that relationship. And this is kind of a talk I was having with my sister, because my nephew is 19, and he's dating a girl a couple years younger than he is. So they're young, and his girlfriend's younger, but I can kind of see that pattern in him where he just totally gives up what he wants to do. He just graduated high school, okay, like in his senior night, his senior night, he wants to be an entrepreneur because his dad's an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. And he wants to be an entrepreneur. He wants to be an MMA fighter. He wants to travel the world. Okay, those are his 3 top things. But ever since he got his girlfriend, and this is his kind of like first, probably the longest relationship he's been in. So it's only been a few months for him. But anyway, this is his longest. But for the last few months, he only does what his girlfriend wants. You know what I mean? He totally forgot about being an entrepreneur. He doesn't train in MMA anymore. He totally forgets about him wanting to travel the world. Okay, that's what I'm talking about, is you totally give up who you really are, your hobbies, your friends, your authentic self, because you want your partner, you want this other person to like you. And you totally giving this up. Okay, rather than, okay, you can still have a relationship, but over here, you can still be an entrepreneur. You can still be trained in MMA. You can still travel the world at the same time you have a relationship. Okay, rather than giving up this whole thing to come over here. Because once you give up this whole thing coming over here, it's really like a scenario of disaster. Okay, something's gonna break. Something's gonna break down. Okay, it's basically just a matter of time before that happens. Okay, and that's just like in my own personal experience. So it's going to happen, but it just depends upon when it's going to happen. It's going to happen in weeks, it's going to take months, or it's going to take a couple years for it to happen. So, it's going to happen, but you have to learn kind of young. You have to learn how to kind of be independent, how to be your authentic self. And the way we kind of do that is really setting boundaries. And that's another thing I kind of want to talk about, even though I'm kind of getting lengthy in the video, is for myself, I have to set boundaries. Okay. Lots of times in relationship, our partner, no matter who they are, our partner, they're always going to test us. They're always going to push us. They're always going to kind of push us to see how much they can get away with. before we kind of put down our foot and say no. Okay, so we have to learn how to set boundaries around ourselves. Boundaries around our hobbies, boundaries are around our interest, our self-interest, our career aspirations. We have to set boundaries all around that stuff. And when somebody violates your boundary, you have to communicate that. Okay, and if they keep on violating your boundary, well, at that point, it really kind of becomes almost a disrespect. If someone's constantly violating your boundary, at that point, you really need to make a decision. If this is the person I really want to be around. Okay, but lots of times we're afraid to set boundaries. Okay, we're afraid to set boundaries at work, because if I set a boundary at work and my boss oversteps my boundary and I say something to him, no matter if it's professional or not, what's the risk? Well, the risk is I could get fired just because I set a boundary. Same thing in a relationship. Well, what happens? What's the risk of setting boundaries? Okay, the risk is, well, I set a boundary, my significant other don't like it. They tell me I don't like it, but I still set that boundary. So then now I have to make a decision. So maybe it ends the relationship. Okay, all from setting the boundaries. But the other thing is, the flip side is, if we don't set boundaries, eventually we're not going to be happy, because people are walking all over us in relationships, friendships, career, professional relationships, and so forth and so forth. We're not going to be happy. The only way you're going to be happy is setting boundaries. Okay, so setting boundaries, once you get used to it, it's not too bad. Okay, but boundaries are going to make you way more happier than waiting weeks or months or years when you're finally so fed up. You finally set that boundary, but you also wasted that time because you didn't learn how to set boundaries from the beginning. Okay, and especially in friendships, sexual relationships, you have a significant other. Some of us are just born with it. We saw our parents setting boundaries. That's how we grew up, so we don't really struggle in this area. Okay, and this might not be you, but if this is you and you're kind of like me, okay, one of the things we got to start doing is setting boundaries. Okay, and one thing that kind of worked for me is, lots of times we can't set like a huge boundary because we're not used to setting boundaries. We got to start setting tiny boundaries. Okay, little simple boundaries that kind of give us a little bit more confidence and give us a little bit more experience of setting boundaries. Like, hey, I can do this. I can, that once you get used to setting simple ones, then you can set bigger boundaries. That's what kind of works out for me. Kind of going simple, then you gradually kind of go up to bigger boundaries and harder boundaries to kind of set. Going straight from you don't set boundaries at all to setting major boundaries. Well, when somebody crosses the line, well, you're not going to do anything because you're not used to basically standing firm. You have to be used to standing firm on setting little boundaries. And maybe little boundaries could be something simple as, hey, I'm going to go to a movie by myself. You know what I mean? And it might bring up questions and whatever, but hey, you still stand to it. Hey, I just want to chill, be by myself, watch a movie. That's like a little boundary, or it's like, hey, I'm going to go hang out with my friends for a couple hours. We're going to go to this restaurant and, eat, drink, watch the game or whatever, and I'll come back. Those are kind of like simple boundaries. Something simple that you haven't done for a while that you've been wanting to do, but you set a boundary. And the reason why it's a boundary, if you say you're going to do it, maybe your significant other comes back and says, no, I don't want you to do it. Okay, so what are you going to say? If it's a boundary, then it's like, well, no, I'm going to do it because they're my friends. I haven't hung out for a while. That's what I want to do. Make sense? I'll give you like another example. Like with my girlfriend right now, she's Thai. So I lived in Thailand for a year. I came back to Ohio, and I'm planning on going back here in a few months. Everything's kind of set up to go back in a few months. So I am going back in a few months. So just basically, chilling and visiting my family and stuff like that. But this was like several months ago, like almost right when I came back to the States. I would always like FaceTime her. I mean, not every day, but at least a few times a week. And I would FaceTime her. So one time I FaceTime her, and she said, There was just like random girl on my Facebook that would like my posts and stuff like that. So, and she said, "Well, no, I don't like this girl liking your stuff. She seems like a trouble. I looked at her pictures." And so the end of the story is she wanted me to block her. So, I looked at the girl. I didn't really know her, whatnot. I talked to her a few times, but I didn't like know her type of thing. So to me, just with, I kind of felt like, yeah, she is probably, you know, she kind of seems to come off like she's a problem or to start trouble and stuff like that. Just, that type of personality. So then I thought, okay, no, I'll block her. I know I don't really block people. For me, I don't block people on my social media, hardly ever. Uh, so because people don't really bother me. But anyway, I blocked her. Okay. But the unique thing that happened when I blocked her, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks later, I'm talking to my girlfriend again, and she brings up another girl that's like liking like a post or something like that, that she wanted me to block her. So then I looked to see who it was, and I was just like, well, I never talked to her. She's just on, on my friends list and stuff like that. And most of it, how I do social media, and I explained to her. I said, well, how I do social media, most of my social media is just business, whatever I post stuff. I'll accept anybody as a friend. Now, as long as you're not tagging me in posts and marketing on my page and doing all that stuff. Once that stuff happens, I usually reach out to you and tell you to stop it. If you don't stop it, I delete you. I don't block you, I just delete you. Um, so I explained to her. So I said, that's I don't block people. I've never talked to her. She leaves me alone. She likes my posts. Sometimes I post a lot of positive stuff and stuff like that. So she likes my stuff. So so anyway, I pretty much told her no. I said no, I'm not going to block her because she's not doing anything. And I'm not going to go on my social media and start blocking everybody. So in the beginning, of course I have her on FaceTime. So in the beginning, she's kind of like pouty and making a pouty face because I didn't block her. But I just kind of, that was a boundary I set. I just stood firm on what my decision was. I was like, no, I'm not going to block her. She's not doing anything. So I don't run around block people on my social media. So, that's how it is. And, she was pouty for like a day after that. She moved on, and then everything's fine. But that's what I mean, like a little boundary. If what happens is people will get worse and worse and worse. Like in that example, I blocked one person. Now 2 weeks later, she has a problem with another person. Then she expects me to block, and it's just going to keep on going and going and going until it gets out of hand, rather than me setting a healthy boundary and saying, hey, I'm not going to do that. And I stand firm to that. Okay. At the same time, when I set a boundary, well, you kind of you don't have to be prepared, but what happens if she turns around and says, it didn't happen, but what happens? She turns around and my girlfriend turns around and says, well, either you block her or I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I have to stand firm to my boundary, because once somebody does that, it's an issue of control. So I'm going to, I would still say, well, no, I'm not going to block her. If you want to move on, move on, but I'm not going to block her. That's a boundary. I don't do it. She's not causing issues or problems. I don't talk to her. So I'm not going to block her. If you want to move on, then move on. You see what I'm saying? I'm still staying in my frame. I set that boundary, so I'm not going to let someone break that boundary. And that's how confident you have to have. That's how confident you have to be when you set boundaries. That's why you kind of start small. Once you start small, you start getting a little bit more confident, and it will be easier for you when you start setting harder boundaries. And when somebody wants to cross that boundary, it will be easy for you to say, no, you crossed my boundary. I'm not going to put up with this. Okay. But other than that, my friends, that's what I want to share with you. It's getting about a half hour now. I don't want to just keep on repeating myself and stuff like that. But the biggest thing is be aware of that. Okay. Be aware if you think you're doing this and you kind of like, aha, this is me, the first thing is be aware of it. Okay. there's a couple of good books out there that will help you. One of the books is called No More Mr. Nice Guy. It's not my book. I'll try to post it here or a link here or a video on it here. It's called No More Mr. Nice Guy, and it's really about. It's a great book. It's one of the better reads that I've read on relationships. I'll tell you that one. It's one of the top ones that I read that really kind of dives into it, dives into the psychology, why we're like that, why we're doing it, and how to fix it. But the biggest thing is getting out of it is really setting boundaries for yourself and really starting to go back into, doing your hobbies, doing things that bring you joy. Sometimes going to a movie by yourself, stuff like that. Not always 100% of your time, always being around your significant other. There's nothing wrong with having your own things that you do. I mean, just like if if you were in college, you got other things going on, you're spread all over the place, then you come back and meet your significant other. You know what I mean? But I'll post a link to that to kind of share it with people. At least a link to another YouTube channel or another YouTube video on that. That's a great read. I think I'm trying to think what his name is. I can't think of his name right now. I'm gonna butcher it. That's why I'm not saying his name. But anyway, just want to share these things with you and stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video.